Have you spent most of your life carrying layers of experience that few people ever see? If you're neurodivergent like I am, autistic, ADHD, or both, you might already understand what I mean. There's this constant effort to manage your inner world while also anticipating how the outer world will respond to it. There's the hesitation when someone asks you how you're doing, because the honest answer isn't something you can explain in a sentence. Many of us live with overlapping challenges that don't easily separate from each other. We move through the world with sensory needs, cognitive differences, chronic pain, fatigue, trauma, anxiety, and we learn, often early, that most people don't want the whole picture. They want a version of us that's easier to follow. I use the term alphabet super to describe this experience. It refers to the layers of diagnostic language many of us carry, those strings of acronyms that appear on our paperwork, but not always in our conversations. For me, it looks like this. I have sensory sensitivities that make loud spaces physically overwhelming. I have motor differences that affect coordination and fine movement. Math is something I've always struggled with. My brain just doesn't organize numbers the way it should. I experience executive dysfunction, starting tasks, shifting between them, finishing them. It's work. I have multiple systems to remind me of tasks, to help me get started, and to see my obligations through. I've also been diagnosed with a connective tissue disorder. It comes with additional labels: POTS, MCAS, IBS. Each one brings its own symptoms, its own rules, its own maintenance. Some days I'm managing chronic fatigue, nausea, and joint pain. Other days, it's anxiety and an autonomic nervous system that won't calm down. I've learned how to track it, support it, build routines around it, but none of this is simple. It all stacks, and it doesn't go away just because I look okay from the outside. When I talk about being an alphabet super, this is what I mean. Not just one label, a constellation, not one explanation, a list. This kind of complexity can be difficult for people to sit with. It can feel like you're constantly disappointing someone's idea of what illness or neurodivergence or functionality is supposed to look like. People sometimes expect one neat label, something they've heard of. Instead, they get a tangled mix of systems that don't behave the way they're supposed to. And that makes people uncomfortable. There's this constant pressure to streamline it, to make yourself easier to understand. So you start making choices about what you share and with who and how much detail you offer. You start reducing the story so you don't have to see that look on someone's face when they disengage. The more complexity you carry, the more invisible labor goes into presenting yourself as manageable. For years, I worked hard to seem steady and collected. I knew how to mask. I knew how to show up in professional settings and seem calm, even when I was dealing with joint instability, gut pain, panic, and the mental static of executive dysfunction all at once. Sometimes I could hold it together for a few hours, sometimes for a whole day, but I always paid for it later. I didn't think of this as burnout for a long time. I thought I was just sensitive or lazy or bad at life. No one had told me that this could be a result of masking or overstimulation or trying to manage too many conditions at once in a world that makes no space for them. And there's something deeply lonely about walking through the world with this kind of internal load, and knowing that most people around you have no idea it's even there. You start to assume they wouldn't want to know. You learn to keep your explanations brief or skip them entirely. You become skilled at performing wellness, even when your entire system is crashing behind the scenes. It takes work to carry multiple conditions. It's not just the management of symptoms, but the decisions around how to talk about them, if you talk about them at all. When you live with overlapping diagnoses, you start to calculate how much is safe to reveal. You start editing, choosing which labels are familiar enough not to raise questions, which ones sound legitimate to people. You start to notice which parts of your reality get met with silence or confusion or skepticism. So you leave things out. Sometimes you simplify your answer just to get through a medical appointment. Sometimes you say you're just tired when the truth is you're in a shutdown. Sometimes you smile and say, I've been okay, when really what you mean is, I'm operating on backup power and it's about to run out. None of this is dishonest. It's actually protective. It's a way of avoiding the blank stares, the awkward pauses, the people who try to relate by comparing your experience to something they don't understand. It's a way of avoiding the disappointment of opening up, only to feel like you shouldn't have. Even in supportive settings, there's a limit to how much people can hold. There are moments where you can feel the conversation starting to shift, where your complexity is being reframed as complaint, where people want to help but don't really want to know. So you make yourself easier. It's not just the words you use, but your needs, your presence, your energy. You shrink to fit what others can manage. And over time, that shrinking becomes habit. You say no when you need to say yes. You push through when you need to pause. You pretend clarity when you're actually overwhelmed. You keep going even when you've run out of internal resources. And no one sees it because from the outside, you seem like you're managing. You become someone who appears capable because you've learned how to hide the cost of appearing that way. This is a very particular kind of loneliness. The loneliness of being surrounded by people while constantly translating yourself into something they can understand, of being praised for how resilient you are while no one really knows what you're carrying. There's no moment where you chose this. It wasn't a decision. It was an accumulation, a response to all the times your honesty was too much, to the moments your symptoms were doubted, your needs dismissed, your diagnoses misunderstood. Sometimes people think that masking is only about hiding traits like stimming or mimicking facial expressions. But for those of us with co-occurring conditions, masking goes further than that. We hide our reality. We avoid asking for help. We downplay the crash. We memorize scripts for basic interactions because we've learned it's easier than trying to explain our actual state. And we don't just hide it from others. We start hiding it from ourselves. We lose track of what we need. We stop trusting our own signals. We get so used to pretending we're okay that it becomes harder and harder to notice when we're not. There's a kind of grief that builds slowly over time. It isn't from just one loss, but from a pattern of being misunderstood, of showing people a small, careful piece of who you are, and watching them back away when you try to show more. For those of us who are alphabet supers, this grief doesn't come all at once. It shows up in small moments. The doctor who tells you to just drink more water. The coworker who assumes your forgetfulness means you're careless. The friend who changes the subject every time you try to explain your actual limits. After a while, you stop offering explanations because you've learned that most people won't ask follow-up questions. They won't stay long enough to see what it actually looks like, living in a body or brain that has multiple systems offline at the same time. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be known, to be understood in full. Not just the parts that are charming or impressive or easy to relate to. There's nothing wrong with wanting someone to say, I believe you. That sounds hard. I still want to know you. But when that rarely happens, something starts to shift internally. You begin to question whether your reality is even worth sharing, whether your experience is just too much, whether you're too much. That thought comes from 1,000 interactions that reinforce it, from people who mean well but disappear, from support systems that don't have room for complexity, from social settings that treat your symptoms like personal failings. And this grief that we experience as a result doesn't always look loud. It often looks like exhaustion or isolation or a subtle withdrawal from conversations, from friendships, from hope. You stop reaching out even when you need help. You try to become easier for others to love. If changing yourself is too difficult, you try instead to hide the parts of you they don't understand. The irony is, we're told that vulnerability will bring connection, that if we're just honest, people will rise to the occasion. But that advice often comes from people who've never had their vulnerability used against them. Vulnerability is risky when you live with conditions that people don't understand or don't want to. You start to feel too complicated for small talk, too symptomatic for spontaneity, too medical for friends, and too emotional for doctors, too sick to pass, but not sick in a way that people believe. But underneath all of that grief, there's still sometimes hope. A hope that someone, somewhere, might hear your full story and stay. That someone might know how to hold your truth without needing to solve it or shrink it or explain it away. That hope doesn't go away, but it does get quieter, and sometimes we need to grieve that too. There's a cost to being half seen, to performing wellness in places where honesty isn't safe, to turning yourself into a version that people can understand while knowing that version isn't fully true. The cost doesn't always show up right away. It builds slowly. It can show up as both physical and emotional fatigue, a kind of weariness that doesn't go away with rest. This having to perform ease all the time can result in burnout, sometimes in anxiety or shutdown, sometimes in disconnection from others, from your body, even from your own needs. Some of us stop noticing that we're hungry, we stop reaching out when we're in pain, and we forget what it's like to move through our day without bracing for misunderstanding. We might even stop thinking of ourselves as someone who could be fully seen. And the truth is, being your full self in a world that rewards simplicity takes an enormous amount of strength. Many alphabet supers are constantly translating, adapting, holding back. We spend hours every week managing symptoms no one else sees. We solve problems every day that most people never even have to think about. We carry medical language in one hand and emotional regulation in the other. We work around the gaps, around the stigma, around the silence. And we do it so well, sometimes even we forget how much we're holding. But the longing doesn't go away, even when it's buried, even when we're taught ourselves not to expect it. There's a part of us that still wants to be known, without needing to explain everything, without the emotional labor of making people comfortable with our truth. There's a part of us that wants to be able to say, I'm struggling today, and not have to justify it. I have 5 diagnoses, and not be treated like a walking complication. I need help and be met with care instead of avoidance. We want to be able to show up as we are, not as we're edited. We want to stop compensating for other people's discomfort. We want to rest, to speak plainly, to stop narrating our pain in a way that makes it more palatable for others. We want to stop shrinking, not to take up too much space, but to finally take up our own space. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with anyone you think might benefit from my content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.